So be me mind and daddy, lifting the bike for the luggage rack. The next stop's Kirkcaldy. There's a giving ships at the harbour moo, and oh, do you see the cruisers? Cinnamon drop I'm sucking the new as Tumbleton stuck to my trousers. I'll sing me ringing my grandma's bell. She cry, come in my laddie, for I ken myself by the queer like smell that the next stop's Kirkcaldy. Is the next stop Kirkcaldy? I'm a bonny laddie, but why does the engine say toot toot? Is the next stop Kirkcaldy? Is the next stop Kirkcaldy? I'm a bonny laddie, but why does the engine say toot toot? Is the next stop Kirkcaldy?
Kirkcaldy, a seaside town, has expanded over the years and has changed in a big way since it was known as the Lang Toon. Its nickname came about as it stretched from the Teal Burn at the west end to the Galatown in the north. A busy trading port and manufacturing town since the 1500s, Kirkcaldy grew because of its unique location and resources, and the wonderful mix of people from miners to philosophers who were born here, grew up, and in some cases, went on to change the world. The end of the war was celebrated all over the country, and Kirkcaldy was no exception. The flags were put up, bonfires were lit, and street parties were held all over the town, with celebration carrying on into the wee small hours of the night. This group of boys were obviously fans of Churchill. A certificate of thanks was issued by the town council to returning servicemen. Here's the Langtown lad and lass for the 1952 youth pageant. The pageant started at the ice rink and competition was intense, with everyone showing great imagination in their costume choices. The pageant parade was always well supported by local firms and townsfolk, all getting into the swing of things and spending hours decorating the floats, grooming the horses and making the costumes. It's interesting to see the many changes in the shops and businesses over the years. For example, at the corner of St Clair Street and Loughborough Road, the National Bank of Scotland was a prominent landmark, while diagonally across the road stood another well-known shop, Ainsley's, still there as the ghostly backdrop to a takeaway sandwich shop. Moving down to the junction of Church Street with St Clair Street, we find another banking name now lost over the years, the Commercial Bank of Scotland. It was all caught on film by CAC, the Scottish cinema chain who owned the Rio Cinema. The finished film was shown in the Rio the next week, guaranteeing a full house with everyone wanting to see themselves on the big screen. Here the parade turns left into Dunaker Road, with the co-op shops on the right-hand side. It's interesting and perhaps sad to see just how many well-known names have disappeared over the years. Adam's the hairdresser, Page the women's wear store, demolished to make way for the Littlewood store. Another name now long gone, the Kirkcaldy and District Co-op. They had the largest department store on the High Street until 1975 when it was destroyed by fire. Still another couple of well-known names, beverages store and a quick glimpse at the Green Cockatoo restaurant. Here's a funny sight to see, the famous mini bread van, advertising Beattie's Bread. Beattie's was taken over by Mother's Pride, where the business ran on for a good few years before closing. At the end of it all, large crowds gathered outside the YWCA, or as it was better known, the Girls' Club, to see the prize winners getting their awards from the lad and lass. The Langtoon pageant really was a big event. Visiting the General Hospital at the bottom of St Clair Street, the lad and lass give toys and books to the children. Did you spot the famous Rooker tea room in the background as they walked to the hospital? A visit from Groucho made their day. The 1975 pageant, seen here at the bottom of St Clair Street with the lad and lass leading the parade. Fife Police used one of the ex-Alexander buses as their mobile control room, which was used for a few years. The recently opened Adam Smith Theatre decorated a trailer advertising forthcoming attractions. GEC, one of the newer factories in the town, decorated a lorry borrowed from the coal board. Lockhart's linen factory based in the Links, sadly now gone. A couple of preserved buses, ex-Alexanders, lovingly restored to their former glory. Another look at the pageant from a high vantage point. Littlewood's store roof certainly gives a different perspective. It's also interesting to note the different haulage contractors that have now gone. Nichols of Dysart, Kirkcaldy, Leith and Glasgow Steam Packet Company, better known as the Pinnace, and James Scott and Company. Behind the two preserved buses comes the latest coach from Fife Scottish, which took you down to London at reasonable cost. High tide in the early 1960s was particularly bad, with the labour exchange surrounded with deep floodwater and waves crashing over the sea wall causing a lot of damage. Barry's linoleum factory dominated the skyline at the rear of Kirkcaldy station until 1964 when it closed. Kirkcaldy had been the world's linoleum capital for nearly 100 years, but such was the decline that when Kirkcaldy's Member of Parliament at the time tried to raise a stooshy in the House of Commons about it by asking how many apprentices would become redundant when Barry's closed, he was told there would be only one. He valiantly tried to carry the battle forward by asking, while the number may indeed be small, does the Minister realise that this loss of one apprentice electrician is quite a considerable loss to this country, and even more of a tragic loss to the individual concerned who is unable to find a place? Barry's, Osler and Shepherd were Nairn's main rivals in linoleum manufacturing in Kirkcaldy. Their factories dominated the skyline around the station and 4th Avenue. Barry's closed in 1964, and in the late 1960s the whole area was demolished and landscaped, giving a much more open and pleasant feel with all the greenery and the trees. Kirkcaldy Station in 1966. And the Fidelity Garage, which had the Roots Group agency. Now closed, the Station Hotel was one of the town's top venues. Hogarth's Mill and Rob's Filling Station, all gone, replaced by flats and Carlisle House. The Allerton Hotel was created by linking two houses together, creating a function room and lounge. The Saturday night dinner dances were very popular. In Victoria Road, tenements were demolished to create a car park for the shops opposite. The office block being built on the Macintosh furniture site was used initially by the Inland Revenue. Two businesses in Dunaker Road, now long gone, Waddle's Paint and Wallpaper Shop and Ronaldson's Coachworks. The EU Congregational Church celebrated 100 years in 1967. There was a full programme of events over the year, and one of the most successful was the summer fete that was held in Priory Park, courtesy of Nairn Williamson. Mid Street and Nether Street underwent a radical transformation in the early to late 1960s, following the wholesale demolition of the lino factories and housing that was considered to be substandard. Pathhead West Church was built in 1844 and was demolished in 1963, along with Good Sirs Bray, shown here on the left. This was to make way for 3 blocks of high-rise flats. The Health and Safety Squad would have had a field day with those workmen. Here's Bailey John Kay, topping out the block of finished flats. Quite thirsty work by the look of it. At the official opening ceremony, Bailey Kay introduced J. Dixon Mabin, one of the Scottish Office officials, to join in performing the ceremony, followed by Housing Convener Councillor Grace Arnott. You can see here the vast amount of land covered by the factories and housing prior to demolition. Levelling Nether Street was quite a task. Provision for an underpass to link the flats to the steps leading down to the beach was also made. Local legend has it that John Buchan named his famous novel The 39 Steps after the steps leading down to the beach at the side of Ravenscraig Castle. Buchan was born in Perth but grew up in Kirkcaldy. It's probably only a legend, of course, because there's actually more than 40 steps. The path was notorious in the winter, with its sharp S-bend causing many problems. The council decided to straighten it, making it much easier and safer. the old houses and factories in Nether Street, from the cottage hospital to the top of the path, were demolished, making the street much brighter and getting away from the enclosed and drab appearance it had for so long. Now a slow trip up St Clair Street to the Gala Town, showing the many changes in the area. This was filmed in 1964. Junction Road with Macmillan's shop on the corner, now home to a letting agency. The Victoria Tavern on the left, along with some housing, now cleared to make way for a bigger car park at the side of Hutt's store. St Clair Town had a lively and busy range of shops. There's Andrew the Butcher next to Greaves the greengrocer. Valenti's opened their ice cream shop and factory a few doors down from Greaves. Further up Roslyn Street, Greg and Scott's Garage and Showroom is on the left. All the buildings on both sides of the street, including the Galatown Church, have been demolished. The church was there from 1877 until 1980. On the left is a former Palladium cinema. It closed in 1950 and became a carpet showroom until it was also demolished in the 1990s. Next door is a chip shop, which used to be a real favourite with ice rink patrons. The Royal Oak Tavern and Elbow Room on the left was the long-time home of the local folk club. This area has seen a vast number of changes, with buildings on both sides of the road being demolished to make way for the new roundabout and dual carriageway. Contrast this with today, and folk returning to Galatown, having been away for several years, might think they'd come to the wrong place. Thomas Muir, a local businessman, had a fine collection of vintage cars, seen here outside his yard in Oswald Road. The yard has since been demolished and replaced with housing. Alexander's buses used the old tram depot in Oswald Road for paint and bodywork repairs for many years, until they moved to new premises on the Prom. Thomas Muir took over the premises and used them until demolition in the 1980s. The new building is used by Abbots Hall Homes. houses in front of the new area of Falkland View were being upgraded and the building being renovated as a community hall when fire broke out in the roof space. 5 fire brigade were on the scene and managed to confine the fire. In St Clair Town, Sutherland Street and the top half of Institution Street were demolished in the late 1960s and replaced with modern flats. The Co-op garage and stables in Institution Street moved to Hayfield Industrial Estate. The old Co-op dairy, which has been closed for many years, was also demolished, making way for the new scheme known as Orkney and Shetland Place. The whole area changed with all this work, becoming much brighter and more open. Clair Town Railway Station opened in 1847 and was well used until the mid-1960s when passenger numbers dropped. The opening of the Forth Road Bridge probably contributed in part to the closing of the station. This was filmed on the last day of operation in 1969. Prefabs, which boosted housing opportunities so much after the war, were already out of date by the 60s, and work started on their demolition in the Overton area. On the left, all you can see are just fields, no garages or supermarkets. The new housing was very popular and demand was high. The Man of the Rock carved at the Red Rocks was made by James Patterson in 1851. Sadly, it was eroded by the sea and eventually collapsed in 1970. Dysart Co-op was founded in 1846 and continued until 1988 when it closed after supplying everything the shopper could ask for over 100 years. Another well-known name in Dysart was J.A. Glassgrocers and Wine and Spirit Merchants. The level crossing at Dysart was always a challenge for many a motorist, especially if they were in a hurry. It was always an eye-opener to see the guard's van trundling down the line on its own, followed by the engine with the empty wagons for the Francis Colliery, or the Dubby as it was known locally. Here you can see the Francis engine waiting to be repaired outside the central workshops. Having dropped off the empties at the colliery, the engine pulls the full coal wagons back up the hill destined for Thornton goods yard. The harbour master's house was built around 1840 and has had a checkered history in more recent times. However, in 2005, work started to convert the building into offices, an information centre and a bistro. Since then, the building has gone from strength to strength, winning several awards. The towers in Quality Street have a plaque showing the date 1589. The toll booth, built in 1576, has been, over the years, a jail and a weights and measures office. And what price health and safety in the 1960s? New housing replaced the old historic housing in the town and created a wee bit of controversy. People thought it just didn't blend in with the old. The plague. A stone from the old housing incorporated into the wall of the new housing at Howard Place dates from 1585, when the Black Death cast its grim shadow. The original house was demolished, but the stone was kept. Dysart Station opened in 1847, but is now just a memory. Along with St Clair Town Station, it closed in 1969. The scene shows the last day of operation. Two well-known shops in Kirkcaldy, Bert's the bookseller and Sang's seed merchants. Kirkcaldy High Street in 1962, and busy it was with two-way traffic passing by lots of well-known trading names. Coming up on the right, Littlewood store near completion. A year or so later, and BHS is being built. The proposed redevelopment of the High Street caused quite a stir, as it meant not just streets being changed, but the loss of housing and older businesses, all being replaced with a large shopping mall. To jog your memory, look at these names from the past. Remember when the buses ran along the High Street? And for some, the High Street itself was the terminus. Work started on the redevelopment of the High Street in the late 1960s, and a swimming pool was incorporated into the shopping mall. Now, 40 years or so later, it's being replaced with a new leisure centre and pool. The east end of the town was also being changed, with Caithness Brothers and Cant the Jewellers all closing and being replaced with retail units. Littlewoods opened in 1963, becoming extremely popular with Kirkcaldy shoppers. This photo was taken to celebrate a trip to Blackpool in 1971. And look at the price list! Call those prices? Almost a giveaway in today's terms. Like so many others, Littlewoods closed as a store in 2006. Its premises now occupied by Debenhams and New Look. The west end of the town also saw big changes, with this entire row of shops on the right being demolished, including Sutty's electrical shop, Nielsen's garage and Wilson's drapery. This cleared the way for road widening and new traffic lighting. In 1974, work was started on the new Safeway store, which was built on the Nielsen's garage site. The demolition of the Philip Hall caused quite a bit of concern in the town. However, the council went ahead with this, and even the promise of a brand new hall didn't really appease the critics. The new hall, however, did go ahead and had more up-to-date facilities than the original. Link Street Library was officially opened in the early 60s by Provost Nicholson. The junction at Bridgeton and Inverteal was another area marked for demolition and road improvement. The Seafield Bar and the old houses along with the shops all had to go for the sake of wider roads and better housing. Pathhead Garden Village was built on the site of the Nairn factories, which had been demolished in the 1960s. It's very difficult to imagine that this whole area was covered with factories and old houses. Work started on the site in the mid to late 1980s, and when completed, certainly made Pathhead an attractive area to stay in. Further along Commercial Street and on the corner of Bogey's Wynd is a Victorian pub, the Fuhrer's Arms. Well worth a visit just to see the original Victorian tiles and fittings. Pathhead Co-op had their office in Commercial Street, along with the bakery, grocery and butchery departments. After the co-op closed, the shops and offices were converted to flats, bringing more people into the area. Demolition of the old Drysart Co-op building started along with a number of houses in Roslin Street. This was to enable landscaping and road improvements to be carried out. Andrew Hutt's supermarket opened in the 1960s but is now the site of Reject's department store. Further down St Clair Street, Forrester's record and music store, various other small shops, the old bank building on the corner of Church Street and various houses were all demolished to make further road improvements. Down at the Port Bray, major changes were taking place, which meant that more buildings had to go, including Grubb's the Ironmongers and the Langtown Bar. They were demolished to make way for a car park at the bottom of Cole Wynd. The 1962 Festival of Sport was held in Ravenscraig Park with a large variety of sports taking place, along with Highland dancing competitions. The beauty contest may not be a popular event these days, but 50 years ago it was a crowd puller. Joan McLean of Fife County Council was chosen as Miss SISA 1962 and presented with the honour by the last year's winner. The Beveridge Park was donated by Michael Beveridge, former Provost of Kirkcaldy. The park opened in 1892 and has long been a popular place for townsfolk to come and relax, enjoy the floral displays and maybe have a wee sail in the pond. In 1962, the Scottish Road Races were held here by Kirkcaldy and District Motorcycle Club. The first motorcycle races were held here in 1948 and continued until 1988. After a gap of 23 years, the Kirkcaldy pageant was held in 2000, finishing in Beveridge Park. There was a whole host of entertainment on offer for both young and old, and accompanied by glorious sunshine. The Langtown Lass was Sandy Douglas from Sinclairtown Primary School, and the Langtown Lad was Christopher Lumsden from Dunaker Primary. The pageant had a number of events and attractions for young and old and was extremely lucky to have good weather, attracting big crowds to the park. The Links Market has been coming to Kirkcaldy for over 700 years and has developed from a street market selling produce and livestock into one of the longest street fairs in Europe. Dunaker Park Golf Club celebrated its Golden Jubilee in 2013. Martin Christie gives a brief history of the club.
Dunaker Park Golf Club has its origins with Dyser Golf Club. The club itself was formed around about 1900. The Dyser course was between the cemetery, the Hallows and the Fairway are names that are commonly known today as to where the golf club was. Around about 1942, the council commissioned the land for public housing, and that led to the closure, if you like, of Dyser Golf Club. The course was opened on 5th of May 1963, and members of Dyser Golf Club started to come up and play at the new course. The professional greenkeeper at that time was Charlie Burke, and Charlie Burke made approaches to around 30 people who had started to play at the course and invited them to consider setting up a club. In terms of the formal opening of the course, which took place on the 5th of May 1963, that was celebrated by a pro-am. The pro-am was attracted a high calibre of professional. Those with good memories remember Ronnie Shade, right down the middle shade is his nickname, Sandy Sadler, who was the amateur, Fred Bullock, the professional, and Bobby Walker, who was the other amateur. And that was a successful day with over 2,000 people watching that opening match. It was incredible in terms of that particular event. The formal opening of the club, in terms of its constitution, was the 30th of June 1963. And the club since then has gone on from strength to strength. Friday, 28th of June 2013, was a celebration of the founding members aspect of the club, and that was attended by former captains, club champions, etc. We had over 84 people in the lounge celebrating the 50th birthday, if you like, of the club, the founding members establishing the club. When it comes to 9th of November, the closure of the 50th celebration was brought to an end through the junior prize giving, where again we were having a fireworks demonstration, big fanfare of fun and indeed social entertainment to bring a close to the 50th of the club.
(1973) saw the last ever Town Council election for Kirkcaldy Borough. This was due to local government reorganisation. The last kirkin of the Town Council took place in the Old Kirk in Kirkwynd. The service was led by the Reverend John Sim. Afterwards, the council members marched along Hunter Street to a reception at the townhouse and then to a lunch at the Station Hotel. The prom in 1966 was the venue for the Scottish Milk Marketing Board cycle race. Since then, the look of the prom has changed a great deal. The Portbury Cinema opened in 1913 with seating for 600 people. It was closed in 1942 and was later demolished and is now a car wash. The Palace Cinema in White's Causeway was built in 1908 and seated 1,000. It had a good run until December 1945 when it was destroyed by a fire. The Carlton Cinema opened in 1937, with seating for 1,450. The Carlton closed in 1960, becoming a bingo hall. In 1963, it became famous as one of the venues for the Beatles' Scottish tour. 10 years later, it was destroyed by fire and the site was used for housing. The Ray Cinema opened in 1938, another 1,000-plus seater, and also run by the Carlow family. It was a shrewd move to build it in this part of town, giving the links area a much-needed amenity. It closed as a cinema in 1960, reopening as a ballroom, bringing a lot of the stars of the 60s to Kirkcaldy. After a short spell as a bingo venue, it is now a Christian centre and totally revamped inside. The Palladium Picture House was originally built as the first Galatown church in 1875. It was converted to a cinema in 1925, it closed in 1950, becoming a carpet showroom until it was torn down in 1990. The ABC Cinema has had a variety of names since it opened way back in 1904. Starting life as the King's Theatre, in 1908 it became the Hippodrome, then in 1916 it closed and reopened as the Opera House. In 1937, patrons would know it as the Regal, right up until 1963 when it became the ABC. Cannon Cinemas bought it in 1988, keeping the name, but later changing it to the MGM in 1992. It became the ABC once again when Virgin took it over and finally closed in 2000. In 1925, another new cinema opened in the town, the Rialto, with over 1,000 seats. It became the Gaumont in 1950 and then the Odeon in 1962. It was destroyed by fire in 1974. The Rio Cinema opened in 1937, the largest cinema in the area. It closed in 1974, becoming another bingo hall. It's been closed for a few years, but now looks set for a new life as an indoor adventure centre. The Normand Hall in Dysart was used as a cinema from 1916 to 1957, when it became a community hall. Somewhat neglected and in poor condition, it was demolished in 1995. The Adam Smith Hall was opened in 1899 by Andrew Carnegie. The hall had over 1,600 seats, including boxes and galleries. A major refurbishment in the early 1970s brought seating down to 475, but created new function suites and meeting rooms. Over the years, the theatre has presented a large number of films, comedies, variety shows, dramas and touring productions, all of which have been extremely popular. The Burma Ballroom was built in 1930 and opened as the famous Trocadero Cafe, selling coffee and ice cream. The Roxy Dance Hall was opened the following year, with a billiard hall at the back of the building. However, the Roxy was damaged by fire in 1935, and after repair it reopened as the Burma. But in 1951 it was hit by another fire and rebuilt again. It was a very popular venue and had an excellent band led by Jack Taylor. Sadly, it went into liquidation in 1963 and changed hands several times, becoming the Garrison, Jackie O's, and latterly Harlem and the Candle Rooms. Now all that history is gone forever with the demolition of this famous venue. The ground was cleared to make way for a hotel and apartments. Kirkcaldy Ice Rink opened in 1938 and is still going strong. It's used for curling, skating and is home for the legendary Fife Flyers ice hockey team, one of Scotland's oldest established ice hockey teams. In 2013, the retired players gathered for a 75th birthday celebration at the ice rink. And as the pictures from the Fife Free Press show, a good time was had by all. Bill Duff and his band were stalwarts at the rink for many years and at the famous dance sessions held on a Saturday night, and were the support band for many of the top big bands such as Joe Loss, Ken McIntosh and Ted Heath. Bentley's Disco evolved from the former Nairn staff canteen and was extremely popular for a number of years. It even had its own beauty contest. It was destroyed by fire and now has housing built on the site. Kirkcaldy swimming pool, built in the early 70s, is a few yards from where its replacement has been built. The pictures show the new pool complete with gym and fitness suite. Michael Nairn started making canvas at his factory in Colwind. He then moved into floorcloth, and when Walton's patent expired in 1877, Nairns built a linoleum factory alongside their large floorcloth factory in Pathhead. 1947 saw Nairns celebrate their centenary with an afternoon tea in Priory Park on Saturday, 5th of July. In 1962, Nairns produced a film called Fine Floors. Here's a short extract of the film, which gives an insight into the making of linoleum. Barry, Osler and Shepherd were Nairn's main rivals in linoleum manufacturing in Kirkcaldy. Their factories dominated the skyline around the railway station and 4th Avenue. Barry's closed in 1964, and after demolition in the late 60s, the entire area was landscaped, giving a much more open and pleasant outlook to the area. Meikle's carpet factory gave quite a number of Dysart folk employment over the years. These scenes were filmed in 1962 and give an insight into carpet weaving. Many of Meikle's carpets were sold locally. Here we see a couple in the Co-op department store choosing a Meikle carpet for their home. Blythe's factory in Lawson Street was one of many linen factories in Kirkcaldy. After it closed, it was used by Scottish Power for a number of years, with another part of the factory being used by Davison the printers. Here we see one of Scottish Power's employees, James Mooney, being given a retiral presentation. The building has lain empty for a number of years now, with various plans for converting the main office block in Park Road into flats, but so far none of them have been carried out. Mackenzie's Malt Works in Seaforth Lane was established in 1844, but closed in 1928. Latterly, the building was used by the Kingdom Boxing Club and was scheduled for demolition to make way for housing, but the plans have been put on hold. The old wash house, seen here in quite a dilapidated state, has since been demolished. Kirkcaldy Market Hall in White's Causeway was a smaller forerunner of the indoor market in the High Street and was quite popular for a few years. Horsepower by the 1960s was rapidly disappearing. This was filmed in Hendry Road, and it's interesting to note the building of the shop units on the left of the picture. Andrew Thompson was well known in Kirkcaldy for delivering his fruit and veg with his horse and cart. This business continued until 2000, when his brother Bob retired. Valenti's ice cream cart was a familiar sight in the town for years, but was replaced by the motorised version, which isn't quite the same. Jock Tumulty delivering milk in Wright Place in 1966, a scene which is now sadly long gone. Three of Kirkcaldy's most famous sons were Adam Smith, born 1723, Sir Sandford Fleming, born 1827, and Gordon Brown. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher and a pioneer of political economy. He spent 10 years writing The Wealth of Nations, publishing it in 1776. Sir Sandford Fleming was born in Kirkcaldy, emigrating to Ontario in 1845. He designed the first Canadian postage stamp in 1851. He later became a director of the Canadian Pacific Railway. He was also the inventor of worldwide standard time. There are plaques erected to his memory both in Canada and Kirkcaldy. Although Gordon Brown was born in Giffnock in 1951, he was brought up and educated in Kirkcaldy. He was selected for the Fast Stream Education Programme at Kirkcaldy High School. In 1997 he was made Chancellor of the Exchequer, and in 2007 he became Prime Minister when Tony Blair resigned from office. Kirkcaldy on the 20th of July 2013 was a riot of colour and sound as a carnival hit the town with a parade, music and dance, which looked as though it had come straight from Rio. The weather made the town feel as though it was in Rio as well. The sun shone and it was hot, just like the dancers and the musicians. An estimated 2,000 people turned out to enjoy the spectacle, the dancers and the music.